Well, the Wall Street Journal is calling it lawfare for dummies. That's the Wall Street Journal editorial board's assessment of Donald Trump's use of a criminal investigation by the Trump Justice Department of the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Over the weekend, Jerome Powell became the first Fed chair in history to have to publicly explain that the president is insane. He did that in the form of a video announcing that the Trump Justice Department has issued investigative subpoenas to him because he has not agreed with Donald Trump's assessment of exactly where interest rates should be during the Trump presidency. Senator Elizabeth Warren described this absurd attack on the Federal Reserve and Jerome Powell today in an important speech that she delivered off campus from the United States Senate at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. And after that speech, Donald Trump suddenly, from out of nowhere, called Senator Warren. Senator Warren will tell us about that phone call when she joins us during this hour. And in another case of lawfare for dummies, Harvard University taught Donald Trump and his Justice Department many lessons when Harvard went to court to block Donald Trump's attempt to not just cut research funding at Harvard University, but to completely take over the university. Donald Trump, who now calls himself the acting president of Venezuela in a flight of derangement, was trying to become the president of Harvard, which is older than both Venezuela and the United States of America. While other universities like Columbia disgraced themselves forever by allowing Donald Trump to seize some control of those universities, Harvard fought back and won in every way, including foreign students. Donald Trump set out to ban foreign students from entering the country bound for Harvard University this year. And not only did Harvard beat Donald Trump in court on that one, but Harvard's enrollment of foreign students has hit a new record high, 6,749 students, 28% of the student body. And what did Donald Trump achieve in the rest of the country in his attempt to block foreign students? A 1% decline nationally in foreign student enrollment in all of American universities. And so, despite communicating his worldwide, his intense personal hatred of foreign students in America, Donald Trump failed to scare them away. And Harvard University crushed Donald Trump. We begin tonight with another case of lawfare for dummies. And in this case, the dummies are Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth. Former Navy combat pilot and astronaut, now Senator Mark Kelly, joined a video in November with other military veterans who are now members of Congress, in which Senator Kelly addressed himself to the American military saying, quote, "Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders." Senator Kelly was the only member of that group who is in an ongoing relationship with the Navy in the form of a pension earned after 25 years of service. It takes 20 years to earn a military pension. Pete Hegseth decided that Senator Kelly's pension was a chain that he, Pete Hegseth, could yank to harm the senator by changing Senator Kelly's retirement grade. That would lower Senator Kelly's retirement grade to something lower than captain, and then that would lower his pension. And so Pete Hegseth set out to shame and fine Mark Kelly for saying something that Pete Hegseth himself had said, that members of the military should not follow unlawful orders. Senator Kelly has insisted on this program and elsewhere that he will not be intimidated by Pete Hegseth. And today, Senator Kelly put Pete Hegseth on the defensive by literally making him a defendant in the case of Kelly versus Hegseth, filed in federal court in Washington, D.C., asking a federal judge to stop Pete Hegseth. Senator Kelly's lawsuit says the process that the Secretary of Defense has directed for reconsidering Senator Kelly's retirement grade violates due process. The Constitution does not permit the government to announce the verdict in advance and then subject Senator Kelly or anyone else to a nominal process designed only to fulfill it. Nor does the statute cited by Secretary Hegseth provide any basis to conduct such a proceeding. Defendants invoking 10 United States Code Section 1370, which governs the grade at which an officer is retired based on whether the officer served on active duty satisfactorily. Senator Kelly's active duty is over. He retired honorably as a captain with a remarkable record of awards and commendations, and his retirement grade and the pension to which he is therefore entitled became final by operation of law at the time of his retirement more than 14 years ago. Nothing in the statute authorizes the Department of Defense to reopen that determination based on post-retirement political speech. And if it did, it would raise serious constitutional concerns and subject all of the nation's retired veterans to an ever-present threat against their retirement. Senator Kelly respectfully asks this court to declare the censure letter, reopening determination, retirement grade determination proceedings, and related actions unlawful and unconstitutional, to vacate those actions, to enjoin their enforcement, and to preserve the status of a co-equal Congress and an apolitical military. Senator Kelly's 46-page lawsuit complaint filed today quotes the video in which Senator Kelly said, quote, "Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders." Senator Kelly's lawsuit said that that statement is simply a plain statement of law. On page 17 of Senator Kelly's lawsuit, it says, Secretary Hegseth himself has previously embraced this core principle. In a 2016 speech, Hegseth made clear that if you're doing something that is just completely unlawful and ruthless, then there is a consequence for that. That's why the military said it won't follow unlawful orders from their commander-in-chief. There's a belief that we are above what so many things that our enemies or others would do. Before her appointment to Attorney General, Pamela Bondi also endorsed this principle. In March 2024, she wrote a section in a court filing titled, "Military officers are required not to carry out unlawful orders." Secretary Hegseth's and Attorney General Bondi's statements of military law were correct. This bedrock tenet of military law that service members are required not to follow illegal orders is also among the first things taught to every service member at the inception of their service. Senator Kelly's complaint filed in court today includes social media statements by Donald Trump saying that what Senator Kelly said is, quote, punishable by death. Leading off our discussion tonight is former Navy pilot Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona. He's a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee and the Senate Intelligence Committee. Senator Kelly, thank you very much for joining us tonight. You have now turned Pete Hegseth into a defendant, where through this process, he's going to have to defend what he has done so far. And in my reading of the law, as your lawyer stated in this complaint, he has violated the law that he claims his action is based on.
Well, Lawrence, thank you for having me on. I want to commend you for the great summary of the lawsuit. And I also want to say, hey, I told these guys, I told Donald Trump and I told Pete Hegseth that I'm not backing down. I'm not going away. This is much bigger than me. I flew dozens of combat missions over Iraq and Kuwait, got shot at, nearly shot down multiple times. I flew in space on the space shuttle 4 times. I've served this country for 25 years. I did not expect that after all of that service and then continuing my service in the United States Senate, that I would one day have to sue the Secretary of Defense for violating my constitutional rights, my rights of freedom of speech, but also due process and separation of powers rights. But, you know, this is much bigger than me. What I really worry about are the other veterans out there, you know, that don't have a platform like I do, don't have the right to speak on the Senate floor. Where are they going to be with this administration if they decide to speak out? So, you know, that's really the reason for my action today. I had to file this lawsuit because I need to be standing up for all Americans, not just myself.
What do you have to do to get Donald Trump to pick up the phone and call you? Here's how Senator Elizabeth Warren did it today.
President Trump's tariffs are driving up costs for families. Millions of Americans have lost their health insurance so that Republicans could fund tax breaks for rich people. ICE is sowing chaos and terror in our communities, resulting in the tragic killing of Renee Good in Minnesota. And Donald Trump's view of the First Amendment is that he gets to say whatever he wants, and he gets to use the power of government to silence, extort, bankrupt, or even prosecute anyone who criticizes him. Acting like a wannabe dictator that he is, Trump is trying to push out the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board and complete his corrupt takeover of America's central bank so that it serves his interests along with his billionaire friends. And he has invaded Venezuela to boost the profits of oil companies and has announced that he will run the country.
Yeah, that's right. Senator Elizabeth Warren went to the National Press Club to deliver an important 20-minute speech on Democratic Party policies, which of course included repeatedly attacking Donald Trump.
For years, I fought for a simple, free government tax filing system so nobody has to pay a couple of $100 just to file their taxes. And every step of the way, the giant tax prep companies have thrown up roadblocks to stop it. And when the IRS finally built a free and wildly popular filing option for American taxpayers, the tax prep companies swooped in to kill it the minute that Donald Trump took office.
In a response to a question after her speech at the press club, Senator Warren said this.
Where is Donald Trump? Has he lifted a finger to move that bill forward in the House of Representatives? He sure knows how to get on the phone when he doesn't like what they're doing over the Epstein files. He knows how to get on the phone when he doesn't like what somebody's trying to do over Venezuela. But is he on the phone to say, move that housing bill so that we can start right now today on expanding more housing in America? Nope.
And shortly after that, Donald Trump did get on the phone, and for the first time in his life, he called Senator Elizabeth Warren. Joining us now, Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts. She's the top Democrat on the Senate Banking Committee, a member of the Senate Finance Committee. Senator Warren, I need to hear all about it. Are you in a car when the phone rings? Where are you? Is it a cell phone call? Go ahead. Set the scene?
Let me say just a little bit more about setting the scene. I appreciate that you picked out long excerpts, but basically what I said in that first part was talking about where Donald Trump is. The urgency of Democrats must win in November 2026 if we're going to have any hope of putting some restrictions on Donald Trump. And so what the speech was about is how Democrats do that. And the answer is we deliver on a populist agenda, that we make it clear that we understand that families are being pressed financially and that we have concrete proposals that are good, that will make a difference, and by damn, that we show we have some spine and that we're actually willing to get in there and fight for it. That's what the speech was all about. And I drew the contrast with Donald Trump about how on day one he promised he was going to lower costs. Here we are a year in, and the cost of groceries is up, the cost of housing is up, the cost of utilities is up, the cost of health care is up, all driven by Donald Trump and the Republicans in Congress and their policies. So I said, we need to hold those guys accountable and we need to deliver on lowering costs for American families. That's what the speech was about. We did a Q&A afterwards. We talked about Trump saying, well, he was going to put a cap on credit card interest rates. Talked about the fact that Trump says he's going to do things on lowering costs for families, but has not delivered and hasn't even given any indication that he's trying. I'm in the car, going back to my office afterwards, phone rings, it's Donald Trump.
So did you recognize the phone number? Was it that White House switchboard number? Or?
Actually, I almost didn't pick up because I didn't recognize the number. But I thought, 202, it's probably somebody here in Washington. And it was somebody here in Washington. So, I talked to him, but that's exactly what we talked about, is I talked about the importance of moving forward on lowering costs. Donald Trump says he wants to do a cap on interest rates on credit cards. I've been arguing for that for years. Then fine, let's get it done. He says he wants to lower housing costs. Hell, we've got a housing bill that is all about expanding the supply of housing, which is one of the most important ways we can start to bring down the cost of housing. It has passed the Senate unanimously. Why is it not law? Because it's held up by Republicans in the House of Representatives. Democrats are ready to go, but not the Republicans in the House. And Donald Trump hasn't lifted a finger to help move that forward. So, look, talk is cheap. I get it. What I want to do is I want to deliver lower costs for American families. And that's what Democrats are in this fight to do.
So the White House issued a statement about this call saying President Trump and Senator Warren had a productive call about credit card interest rates and housing affordability for the American people, the official said. That strikes me, Senator, strategically as an attempt by the White House by Donald Trump, to try to get himself associated with you because he may believe that voters trust you on these issues more than him?
Well, look, this is the deal right now. The White House is beginning finally to feel the heat. That American families are in worse financial shape than they were when Donald Trump was sworn in a year ago. I'll just pick one on this, Lawrence. Did you know that foreclosure rates, mortgage foreclosure rates, people losing their homes, it's up 21% since Donald Trump was sworn into office? The American people have been telling us for years, election after election, that they want somebody to get in there and start unrigging that system. This economy keeps working better and better and better if you start out as a millionaire, and even better if you start out as a billionaire. But it's not working for hardworking families. You know, I don't always agree with James Carville, but he said just about a month or two ago, he said it was clear even to him that Democrats need to run on the most populist agenda since the Great Depression. And if we're really going to win this election in November 26, that's exactly what we've got to do. We've got to run on a populist agenda. We've got to show we've got the backbone to fight for the really tough ways to make changes in this system, even if those changes do not appeal to our billionaire donors and our CEO corporate friends. We got to be Democrats again. You know, the Democrats who delivered Social Security and Medicare, the Democrats who delivered minimum wage, the Democrats who delivered legal rights for unions, the Democrats who delivered health care coverage for everyone and home ownership opportunities for veterans and for first-time home buyers. We've got to be the people who make the concrete offers about the changes we're going to make and show that we're willing to get in this fight to get it done, because we got to win in November.
All right, today, amid just the blitz of headlines on what has been a gigantic news day following a gigantic news week, you might not have noticed the news today. You might not have seen the headline today that today a federal court blocked the Trump administration from cutting energy funding just for blue states. This is billions of dollars Congress appropriated for clean energy projects of various kinds all over the country. Trump administration decided, and they admitted this, they decided that just in blue states, just in states that didn't vote for Trump, they would cut all of that funding. They'd leave the funding in place in states that voted for Trump. They would cut it in states that didn't vote for Trump. A federal court today ruled that that is illegal and stopped the Trump administration from doing that. That ruling today came after another federal court today stopped Trump from shutting down a big offshore wind farm in Rhode Island and Connecticut. Trump's shutdown of that project, according to the courts today, was also illegal. And so yet another federal court blocked Trump on that as well, so that work on the wind farm will be able to go ahead. Both of those rulings today follow last night yet another federal court blocking Trump, this time from cutting funding to the American Academy of Pediatrics. This is a doctors group, a pediatricians group that criticized the flock of ducks level insane quackery at Trump's Department of Health and Human Services under RFK Jr. Trump responded by canceling federal grants for the American Academy of Pediatrics. A judge has now ruled that that was illegal retaliation, and so Trump is blocked from doing that. That funding has to be reinstated. That ruling comes after another federal judge just blocked Trump from cutting off federal election funds to states in retaliation for them not changing their election rules in ways that Trump wants. The judge said, quote, "The Constitution assigns no authority to the president over federal election administration." And so Trump got blocked on that one, too. Shall I keep going? I could keep going. Another federal court just blocked Trump from freezing billions of dollars for childcare and social services for kids, again, in Democratic-run states, as some kind of punishment against those states for electing Democrats, punishing them for that by cutting off the Temporary Assistance to Needy Families program. Because, what would Jesus do? Trump was also just blocked from doing that by yet another federal court. It's almost like he is losing all the time and everywhere now. There may still be people in America who are shocked that Trump keeps breaking the law over and over again, blatantly and insistently. The courts no longer appear to be shocked by that. And the courts now are just telling him no, very bluntly, every single day and often multiple times a day. And it's not even just the courts. As I know you are aware, last week in one 48-hour stretch, we had a Senate vote for a war powers resolution to block Trump from any further military adventurism in Venezuela. 5 Republican senators crossed over to side with Democrats to pass that war powers resolution. It was enough to advance that. It's going to get another vote in the Senate this week. That came right on the heels of 17 Republicans in the House breaking ranks with Trump and siding with Democrats on the Affordable Care Act, to try to at least temporarily undo the disastrous decision Trump and Republicans made in their so-called Big Beautiful Bill, the decision to send tens of thousands of American families' health insurance rates through the roof. 17 Republicans crossed over, defied Trump, and joined with Democrats to pass that health care matter in the House. Now it's going to come to the Senate. Trump is now whining about how he might have to veto it if and when it passes in the Senate as well, because he definitely wants to make sure that people's health insurance premiums double or triple in cost for nothing other than something that he personally did. He apparently wants that. I mean, what we've just seen in Congress is one of the worst rebukes Trump has had from congressional Republicans since he has been back in office this whole disastrous year. And I got to tell you, this didn't get as much attention as it should, but right on the heels of that biggest rebuke that Trump has had in Congress, those series of decisions, both in the House and the Senate, Republicans crossing over to join with Democrats to rebuke Trump on multiple policy issues. Right on the heels of Trump, the Senate giving Trump a one-finger salute on Venezuela and the House giving him a one-finger salute on what he did to people's health insurance. This did not get enough attention, but did you see this? Look, headline: Congress is rejecting Trump's steep budget cuts to science. Lead: Congress is racing to undo thousands of cuts to federal science programs that President Trump called for last year. Trump is trying to cut the National Science Foundation 56%. Congress is now saying they will cut it less than 1%. Trump wanted to slash NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. You know, the weather. Congress's budget for NOAA is no cuts to NOAA, flat funding for NOAA. Trump wants to cut basic research, which has been the lifeblood of American technological innovation since World War II. Trump wants to cut basic research more than 33%. Congress instead is bumping up the budget for basic research by more than 2%. Trump is demanding all these cuts to science, and Congress is saying no. And this is a bipartisan thing. This started in the Senate as a bipartisan agreement. Last week, the House voted for it as well. I know it's like muscle memory to assume, A, that Congress does nothing, and B, if they ever defy that rule and do something, it's always something bad. But that is changing a little bit here. And it's changing all against Trump. And Republicans in the House are down to such a slim margin there now that if every Democrat is present, at the moment, Republicans can only afford one defection on any given vote. They can only give up one Republican vote in the House and still pass things that their leadership supports. And they know they're going to get walloped in the midterms. And with moderate Democrat Mary Peltola announcing today that she's going to run against the unpopular Republican Alaska Senator Dan Sullivan, that means that Democrats are getting pretty close to a shot at taking over the Senate in the midterms as well. They've got a shot at taking over the Senate, in addition to the near certainty that they will take over the House. We've got the courts pushing back harder and harder, and now apparently losing that sense of shock they had that the administration really is just blatantly breaking the law all the time. The courts are finally getting it and pushing back and seeming to understand what it is they're up against. We've got the Congress, believe it or not, in some ways pushing back. While simultaneously, Republicans are losing any hope of hanging on to power in Congress. It looks like the Democrats will be taking over.
I think what we are seeing is a real attempt to institute the kind of Putinization of the United States of America, if you will, in that what Trump did in Venezuela was not to overturn a government in order to install a democratically elected leader or an opposition leader. What we saw was him extracting a leader almost as a threat to those remaining behind to say, give me a cut, or I'm going to do something even worse. That is actually slightly different than the United States is going to become a colonial power. That is a personalized power that looks very much like Vladimir Putin.
Fled to the United States at the onset of the 1979 revolution that left this regime in power all of these years. She is an adjunct fellow at the Middle East Institute and holds a doctorate in Middle East studies as well. Nazi, very good to have you here.
Thanks for having me back.
What is your gut telling you about what is happening in the home country that you love, that I know you want to see restored to its own greatness? Do you believe this is actually happening, that the regime will fall at this point?
First of all, thank you for having me back, and thank you for continuing your focus on Iran. It's so important to get their messages out. I was born and raised in Tehran. My parents are from Shiraz. That Trey was just talking about that the protesters are coming out. It's heart-wrenching. The videos are hard to watch, but I'm not at any level surprised of the brutality of this regime. And I keep asking myself, if this regime is readily opening fire on its own citizens and killing women, men, children randomly, just imagine what it could do and has done to others around the world, to people that don't fall in line in supporting the regime, in seeing eye to eye or trying to push back. This is an international threat. The Islamic regime has been a thorn on the side of the American administration since inception for the past 47 years. And I think this is a defining moment where we can actually affect change.
So when you hear about these meetings with the national security team and President Trump, and you hear what he said in that video where he does not like what he's seeing, and he has said before that if they start killing people in the streets, and you heard him talk about the resources at hand, whether it be, cyber or kinetic, we're not sure because he's meeting with his national security officials. What's your reaction to that when you hear the President of the United States talking that way? We haven't really heard that from prior presidents.
I think the President has a special affinity for the Iranian people. He's a businessman from New York City, and his domain has been real estate. And we have successful Iranians here in New York and across the nation that have been in touch with the President, have voiced their opinion. So when he says that the Iranians are special and they're business savvy and they're smart, he means it because he knows them. But aside from that, I think since the window of opportunity is closing, it's important for him to take action or make a decision on what's the next step. It seems like I'm ready, guns loaded and ready to go. That's a red line in foreign policy jargon. If you say that, you have to act. Mm-hmm. But knowing the President and judging by the way he's conducted foreign policy, he's giving himself all kinds of options how to enforce this red line. I actually think that his offer to talk is one such option, because I was here sitting a few days after June 12th or saying that how could the President attack Iran a few days before the ultimatum started. If you remember, he was supposed to wait until Sunday, but on Friday he attacked.
He likes the element of surprise.
He does like the element of surprise.
And I think you're so right that the words that he's saying now around all of this, I think signal that he is considering all options. He will act when he is ready,
yes,
and not before. And he doesn't want to convey exactly what he's going to do. It keeps them, the regime, on edge. They don't really know what.
And he's not the kind of leader that likes his hands forced. So obviously he's going to do it, and he's going to do it at the time that he thinks is the right time.
Leave now. That is a warning from the State Department to any American citizens inside Iran right now as the regime faces its most serious anti-government protests in years. President Trump ratcheting up the pressure on Iran, saying he's putting a 25% tariff on any country that does business there, quote, effective immediately. The violence inside Iran is growing worse amid a brutal crackdown, with one human rights group confirming the deaths of more than 500 protesters. It is an incredible black box, and to think that such a black box could exist in a world of social media like this. But Jumana Karacha is out front, and I want to warn our viewers that some of what you're about to see in her report may be disturbing.
Just in, CNN has learned that about 1,000 additional Customs and Border Protection agents are set to deploy to Minneapolis. That is according to two federal law enforcement sources. An ICE agent there shot and killed Renee Good just last week. Let's get to CNN's Whitney Wild for the very latest on all this. In this additional deployment, Whitney, what are you learning?
Well, this is a massive increase, John, because this was already the largest immigration action to date, with 2,000 agents spread throughout the Twin Cities. Now we know that's going to be a 50% increase, 3,000 agents spread throughout that area. This is according to two sources. According to CNN's Priscilla Alvarez, Customs and Border Protection Commander Gregory Bovino had already been on the ground. He is going to be part of this operation. He is a well-known figure. He led operations in Chicago, New Orleans, and Charlotte. One of the sources telling Priscilla that he is going to be conducting targeted operations, which include door knocks. And in those situations, the documents that are provided to those targets will include administrative warrants, which are signed by an immigration officer but do not carry the same legal weight as a judicial warrant, or they will be copies of final orders of removal. John, as you mentioned, this all comes on the heels of an ICE officer shooting and killing Renee Nicole Good. Leaders in Minneapolis and leaders at the White House have two completely different ideas about what happened. The White House continuing to defend that officer, saying that he feared for his life, that she attempted or did run him over, saying that this was an act of domestic terrorism. Kristi Noem doubled down on those comments in an interview with Jake Tapper on Sunday. Minneapolis leaders say that could not be further from the truth. She posed no risk to that officer, that this was a completely unjustified shooting, and they are calling for more local involvement in a federal investigation, which at this point is being led exclusively by the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minneapolis. New over the weekend, John, Democratic lawmakers attempted to enter an ICE facility. They were inside briefly before being escorted out. On Thursday of last week, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem had changed the policy about allowing unannounced visits by lawmakers, saying that they need at least a week's notice. And John, the reason for that, she said, was that it's too difficult to move around the staffing that is required for an unannounced visit. Basically saying when you have these lawmakers who just show up, that means that they have to take agents off of other important tasks and instead escort them inside these buildings. So now saying no more unannounced visits. Instead, they want at least a week's notice, John.
Within minutes after the killing of Renee Nicole Good by an ICE agent, the Trump administration, including Donald Trump, began an all-out campaign to describe her as a domestic terrorist without providing the public with any evidence to support that claim. When asked to clarify why Secretary Noem jumped to that conclusion so quickly, Secretary Noem doubled down on the comments she made, again, with no evidence provided to back them up. Watch.
You said that she was a domestic terrorist. How do you define domestic terrorist?
She weaponized her vehicle to conduct an act of violence against a law enforcement officer and the public. As they are doing that,
how can you assert with certainty that she was trying to hurt the officer as opposed to she was trying to flee the scene?
if you look at what the definition of domestic terrorism is, it completely fits the situation on the ground.
That's not true, but we should also note that analysis of the video shows that Renee Nicole Good was steering away. She had turned the tires away from the officer before he opened fire. Noem's definition of domestic terrorism, quote, an act of violence against a law enforcement officer, actually came back to bite her in the rear end later in that very interview. Watch.
I want to show some video to you right now and ask, what is the appropriate response for the police officers in this situation? Those are law enforcement officers being physically attacked. By this standard, would any of those officers be justified in shooting and killing the people causing them physical harm?
Every single situation is going to rely on the situation those officers are on. But they know that when people are putting hands on them, when they are using weapons against them, when they are physically harming them, that they have the authority to arrest those individuals.
The president pardoned every single one of those people.
And make sure that they're getting justice for their actions going forward.
President Trump pardoned every single one of those people.
And every single one of these investigations comes in the full context of the situation on the ground. And that's one thing that President Trump has been so focused on, is making sure that when we're out there, we don't pick and choose which situations are and which laws are enforced and which ones aren't.
I just showed you video of people attacking law enforcement officers. Undisputed proof, undisputed evidence. And I just said President Trump pardoned all of them. And you said that President Trump is enforcing all the laws equally. It's just not true.
I can't cover her without sort of injecting what we know, what she's told us about her own personal character. The sadistic act of shooting her own dog is something she writes about in her own book. So that's who's running all of this as a starting point.
Well, she's not really running anything. Let's be real. She is a complete puppet. And Corey Lewandowski is running the Department of Homeland Security. Actually, he's following directions of Stephen Miller, who is running it. And there's no question that she can't even put a coherent sentence together to respond to those questions because she doesn't actually understand the things that she's saying. Obviously, even if she drove her car directly at the officer, that's not domestic terrorism. But what you said is exactly right, which is, first of all, if she wanted to use her car as a weapon, why did she back up? And then why was she clearly turning the steering wheel? But what really is remarkable here is they've made up their mind. They made up their mind before seeing many of the videos. And they already concluded, from Trump to Noem to J.D. Vance to Stephen Miller, that this guy was acting within his rights to shoot her 3 times, shoot a moving vehicle, which is against all law enforcement training, and shoot her 3 times in the head and kill her. And yet now we're supposed to believe that the FBI is going to do an independent investigation and that they're actually, of course not. That is garbage. They are sweeping this under the rug. As they do with anything that is politically damaging to them. And then they'll focus on, as we were just talking about, Jerome Powell or anybody Donald Trump doesn't like. It is the definition of unequal prosecution. And what part of the problem is the law, which is why I'm introducing a bill that would change qualified immunity for that officer, because it is true that if the officer subjectively believes that he was at risk, and there's a broad standard that, you know, in the blink of an eye, do you know yes or no, then he is immune from liability. So I'm trying to change it to an objective standard, which is to say a reasonable officer in that situation, what should they have done? Because in some cases, yes, they should have qualified immunity. But in this particular case, where you have these rogue officers in masks, totally militarized, absolutely demonizing and terrorizing cities and communities all around the country, separate and apart from whether they're immigrant communities or not, Americans. Renee Good is an American. And this is what they are bringing. You know, you talk about Venezuela, like this is what a dictator rules with secret police that are indiscriminately killing people, that he's telling oil companies he's going into Venezuela before he tells Congress, like the oligarchs in Russia. He's using our criminal justice system as a political tool. That is the #1 lesson that we give to other countries around the world about the step 1 for democracy. I mean, just look at what is going on. It is Vladimir Putin's playbook that Donald Trump is following, and he has all of these lackeys who are just doing his bidding for him, and it's disgraceful, and it's going to cause real damage to this country, to our own national security. Let's be real. This is not something like it's just going to stay in Venezuela or overseas. Yeah. It's going to come back, and it's going to bite us in the ass.
I mean, that's our message to all the titans of industry, the tech bros and finance folks who fly private and think Donald Trump's unrestrained fetish with retribution and revenge doesn't impact you, won't impact you over the next 3 years. Unfortunately, I fear you're about to be proven very wrong as he gins up a politically motivated criminal probe into Jerome Powell that former Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says puts the United States of America on a path toward a banana republic. Breaking over the weekend, news that the Trump Justice Department has opened a criminal investigation into Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell over whether Powell lied to Congress about the scope of the renovations of the Fed's headquarters. It comes after nearly a year of Powell standing up to Donald Trump and asserting his independence and that of the Federal Reserve amid an all-out pressure campaign by Donald Trump to get Powell to cut interest rates, even if doing so could be devastating for the U.S. economy. Powell posted a video on the website of the Board of the Governors of the Federal Reserve calling out the Trump administration. Watch.
This unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure. This new threat is not about my testimony last June or about the renovation of the Federal Reserve buildings. It is not about Congress's oversight role. The Fed, through testimony and other public disclosures, made every effort to keep Congress informed about the renovation project. Those are pretexts. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president. This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead monetary policy will be directed by political pressure or intimidation. I have served at the Federal Reserve under 4 administrations, Republicans and Democrats alike. In every case, I have carried out my duties without political fear or favor. Public service sometimes requires standing firm in the face of threats. I will continue to do the job the Senate confirmed me to do, with integrity and a commitment to serving the American people.
This criminal investigation into Jerome Powell isn't just an alarming sign of Donald Trump's growing embrace of authoritarianism and authoritarian tactics. Former Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warns on CNBC that it could also tank the American economy, sending us down the same path as countries like Argentina, Turkey, and Venezuela. Yellen saying this, quote, "It seems to me that the market should be more concerned." Her warning is echoed in a statement signed by every living former Fed chair from both Republican and Democratic administrations, as well as former Treasury secretaries, former heads of the Council of Economic Advisors, and National Economic Council members. They write this, quote, "This is how monetary policy is made in emerging markets with weak institutions, with highly negative consequences for inflation and the functioning of their economies more broadly. It has no place in the United States, whose greatest strength is the rule of law, which is the foundation of our economic success." But Donald Trump's attempt at using his favorite tool of retribution and revenge, the now very willing Justice Department, to crush the independence of the Federal Reserve, could maybe possibly be blocked by his own party. Senate Banking Committee member, Republican Senator Tom Tillis, issued a statement that reads, quote, "If there were any remaining doubt whether advisors within the Trump administration are actively pushing to end the independence of the Federal Reserve, there should now be none. It is now the independence and credibility of the Department of Justice that are in question. I will oppose the confirmation of any nominee for the Fed, including the upcoming Fed chair vacancy, until this legal matter is fully resolved." I guess we have one.
Second, bureaucratic blockers. If you work with Elon, you know he finds the blockers and you remove them. We will take a wartime approach to people and policies that block this progress. You want to block? You can work somewhere else. Barriers to data sharing, authority to operate, or ATOs, test and evaluation, and contracting are now treated as operational risks, not simply bureaucratic inconveniences. We are blowing up these barriers. That's why today, at my direction, I'm establishing a barrier removal SWAT team under R&E with the authority to waive non-statutory requirements and escalate to our great Deputy Secretary, Steve Feinberg, anything that slows down the acceleration of AI capabilities. Third, compute resource. We will invest heavily in expanding our access to AI compute, from data centers to the tactical edge, and will tap into hundreds of billions of dollars in private capital flowing into American AI. President Trump's executive order has directed us to build data centers on military land and to work with the Department of Energy to ensure that we dramatically increase the number and breadth of resources needed to power this computing infrastructure.
Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn. Senator, great to have you with us this morning. So there's a reason why ICE is surging into Minneapolis, as you know, because of the overwhelming fraud that recently came to light. I know you are leading your colleagues in introducing legislation to deport and denaturalize fraudsters, those who take advantage of American taxpayers. Can you tell us more?
Yes, indeed. What we would do is amend the Nationality and Immigration Act and make certain that all fraud, not only fraud above $10,000, but all fraud that is committed against the U.S. taxpayer and our government would be deemed as a deportable or a denaturalization offense. And right now, there are scattered portions of fraud, but it is not explicit that all fraud is deemed this way. And indeed, also, it would allow these individuals, once they're apprehended, to be held until their hearing, and it will allow any court, not just an immigration court, but any court to hear these cases. And the reason for doing this is because the American people have looked at what has happened in Minnesota with billions of dollars of fraud. And then we're hearing all across the country where whistleblowers are speaking up and are pointing out it's not only daycare centers, but it's elder care. It is programs that are there to assist people that are underserved. It is health care. And we are seeing this across the board. So this makes it easier to conduct those denaturalization processes and deportations.
Yes.
Well, tensions remain high in Minnesota after protesters and federal agents repeatedly squared off on Monday. At one point, agents shot rubber bullets and deployed tear gas to break up the protesters. And then here is some new video we just got into Fox. These are fireworks being thrown at those same federal agents. Minnesota now is suing the federal government. Here's Minnesota AG Keith Ellison. Watch.
We ask that the courts will end the surge of thousands of DHS agents into Minnesota. We ask the courts to end the DHS unlawful behavior in our state, the intimidation, the threats, the violence.
What we are seeing right now is not normal immigration enforcement. We are not asking ICE not to do ICE things. We are asking this federal government to stop the unconstitutional conduct that is invading our streets each and every day.
DHS, meantime, is accusing state and local officials of prioritizing politics over public safety. They say some of the illegal aliens they've arrested have lengthy criminal records, including convictions of strong-arm sodomy, strong-arm rape, and sexual assault. Suit alleges that the influx of these agents under the Trump administration's Operation Metro Surge harms Minnesota's policing powers and violates states' sovereignty. Maria, but, it's important to point out why the agents began to flood the zone, if you will, and that is because of the $9 billion plus fraud that has been exposed. Now that headline is off the table, and you see Keith Ellison, the AG there, and of course the mayor, who ignored that fraud for years along with the governor. They've got a new storyline, and now the lawsuit has been filed. Think about that for a second.
Well, it's even broader than that. If the Democrats did not endorse and willingly allow a wide open border, then we would not have 10 to 20 million illegals, some of whom have committed crimes, and that would not have stoked President Trump to flood the field with agents. So, they lit the match, and then when Border Patrol does their job and uncovers and lawmakers uncover this fraud, they start pointing fingers.
Well, and in a state like Florida, if local and state officials would cooperate with DHS, they wouldn't be in the streets. Florida just announced over 10,000 detainees who are being deported because our law enforcement officers, when they encounter a criminal alien who has a record like this, they're turning them immediately over to ICE. ICE doesn't have to go into the streets and look for these criminals. Our law enforcement officers are giving them over and allowing them to be deported.
Right.
Oh, good morning. That lawsuit, by the way, filed yesterday in federal court, accuses the federal government of targeting the state of Minnesota as a way to punish political opponents in blue states. Attorney General Keith Ellison says the number of ICE agents here in the Twin Cities, reported to be about 3,000, far surpasses the number of police officers in both Minneapolis and St. Paul. State and city leaders say that the scope of this enforcement activities we've been seeing has been having a big negative impact on everything from businesses to schools. The lawsuit calls for federal agents, though, to stop using what they call excessive force, to stop wearing masks during raids, and they're demanding that agents wear body cameras.
This surge has made us less safe. Thousands of poorly trained, aggressive, and armed agents of the state, of the federal government, have rolled into our communities, overwhelmed our local police departments, and law enforcement agencies should be focused on our public safety, but instead, many are dealing with the aftermath of DHS agents' chaos and violence.
If the goal was immigration enforcement, if the goal were simply to look for people that are undocumented, Minneapolis and St. Paul would not be the place where you would go. There are countless more people that are undocumented in Florida and Texas and Utah. Why are they in these much smaller cities in the middle of the Midwest? The answer is very clear. It is politics.
In response, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem called the federal lawsuit an illegal action by corrupt and activist politicians. The case will now make its way through the courts, of course, and there is no clear timeline yet as to how long it'll take before a judge can hear this and make a ruling. Meanwhile, there are reports that even more federal agents are on their way to the Twin Cities. Minneapolis City Council member Jason Chavez says that 1,000 additional agents are expected to arrive in Minnesota, and he is urging his constituents to be careful while running errands and asking for help from the community if needed. By the way, the Whipple Federal Building here, which is now the base of operations for these ICE agents, has also been the focus of a lot of anti-ICE protesters. But over the past 24 hours, you can see behind me the entire complex now surrounded by barricades. This morning, we've seen a few vehicles driving, honking their horns. For the most part, it has been pretty quiet as federal agents prepare for another day of Operation Metro Surge. But we are expecting a fairly large turnout here in the next hour. Back to you guys.
Right. Okay. Bill Keller for us there live. Thank you. And from that location to another location, I want to take you live now to Portland Avenue in Minneapolis. That is where the memorial for Renee Good, the woman shot and killed by ICE agents, continues to grow. Just days after her death, ICE agents and activists in vehicles we have seen continue to clash.
And new videos from the weekend show ICE agents asking someone if they learned their lesson. This video is from Sunday in Shakopee. The agent accused the driver of following officers.
We have some breaking news to share with you on this Tuesday, as Fox News is reporting that the Trump administration has ended the temporary protection status for Somalis in the United States. We're taking a look here at a social media post courtesy of Fox News, and Fox News Digital saying this: the Trump administration is ending temporary protection status for Somalia, affecting several thousand Somalis currently living in the U.S. and several hundred currently living in Minnesota under the protection. Somali migrants with TPS will be required to leave the country by March 17th. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem told Fox News Digital in a statement, quote, "Temporary means temporary. Country conditions in Somalia have improved to the point that it no longer meets the law's requirement for temporary protected status." That statement went on to say, quote, "Further, allowing Somali nationals to remain temporarily in the United States is currently and contrary to our national interests. We are putting Americans first." Bringing us out to a live image that we have of the White House over in Washington, D.C., as I continue to cite some more of this reporting courtesy of Fox News Digital. Sources tell Fox News Digital that there are 2,471 Somali nationals currently in the U.S. under TPS, with just over 1,300 in the country with pending TPS applications. The move comes as DHS continues ICE operations in Minneapolis, Minnesota, after a widespread, roughly $9 billion fraud scheme involving members of the Somali community plagued the state. Fox News Digital learned that an estimated 600 Somali nationals who are protected by TPS live in Minnesota. Now, Somalia was granted temporary protection status in 1991 as a result of an ongoing civil war in the African nation. Former President Biden most recently extended the protection in September of 2024. Now, the decision to end TPS for Somalia also comes a day after Minneapolis, the Twin Cities there, Minneapolis and St. Paul, sued the Trump administration after a historic federal immigration enforcement operation was launched by ICE and DHS. Last week, during ICE operations in South Minneapolis, a woman was fatally shot by an immigration officer as she drove her vehicle toward agents, prompting agitators to riot across the city and in cities across the U.S. Secretary Noem labeled the woman who was killed, Renee Nicole Good, a, quote, domestic terrorist, saying, quote, she weaponized her vehicle after blocking ICE agents on the road. Now, footage from the encounter shows an agent approaching Good's vehicle and ordering her to step out. And according to Noem, Good then attempted to run over the officer, prompting the agent to fire multiple shots into the car, killing the 37-year-old mother.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift,
Now the numbers continue to rise. At least 646 civilians reportedly killed in Tehran as thousands of protesters are rising up, speaking out against the Iranian regime and the country's weak economy, inflation soaring. President Trump is warning Iran against any killings. The regime saying it is ready to negotiate, but also prepared for war. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt yesterday. Watch.
I think one thing President Trump is very good at is always keeping all of his options on the table, and airstrikes would be one of the many, many options that are on the table for the commander-in-chief. Diplomacy is always the first option for the president. There was an official from the Iranian government, I believe it was reported earlier, that reached out to a member of the president's very close team, Special Envoy Witkoff, expressing a far different tone than what you're seeing publicly.
The U.S. State Department issuing a travel advisory warning all Americans, quote, to leave Iran now. Have a plan for departing Iran that does not rely on U.S. government help. Joining me now is Stevens Incorporated Executive Vice President. She is former senior advisor to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Mary Kissel back with us. Mary, great to see you.
Yeah, it's great to be back, Maria.
Thank you so much for being here. This story has been incredible with these people rising in Iran. It feels different this time than prior protests. How do you assess what's taking place right now?
I think you're exactly right. It is very different, Maria, for many reasons. First of all, the regime has lost its proxies. Thanks to the hard work of Israel and the U.S. military assistance. The regime has an economic crisis, which is far more severe than we've seen in prior years, with not just inflation, but the water crisis, which meant that it's lost its base of rural support. It's lost Venezuela, which was a big banking center for the regime. You know, these events that seem so disconnected actually are connected and have secondary consequences. And most importantly, you have a U.S. president who is voicing support for the Iranian people, and that's very, very different than what we saw back in 2008. So you put all those things together, and there's a real chance for positive change here.
You know, I mean, the Iranians are begging the Trump administration to get involved, and I wonder how much involvement you would expect and what that looks like, because President Trump is leaving everything on the table. We had Reza Pahlavi on Sunday. I spoke with the former Crown Prince, and he's asking President Trump to get involved somehow and eliminate this leadership, the Ayatollah. Here's Reza Pahlavi with me Sunday. Watch.
That kind of assistance will go a long way in letting the Iranian people prevail in this war that we have against this regime. And we need to cut the snake's head off for good so it can no longer be a threat to Iranian interest, to American interest, to regional interest, and the only solution is to make sure that this regime goes down for good and the Iranian people can liberate themselves, because they are contrary to this regime that is a sworn enemy of America. We Iranians are a friend to America. We proved it before, and we'll prove it again.
So what do you think here, Mary? What should the president do? How would you expect the U.S. to be involved here?
Well, you know, I think that these situations are often characterized as black or white, that the president either gets involved or he doesn't get involved. But the reality of American power is that we have a lot of options in between. We have, for instance, vast cyber capabilities that we could wield. We have the ability to give the Iranians, the ordinary Iranians, the ability to communicate with one another. We could do the same thing, for instance, for the Cuban people. We could do the same thing for the Chinese people. You know, we have diplomatic powers where we could rally our allies in Europe and in other places to start preparing for a post-Islamist Iran, and we could broadcast that to the Iranian people. The Iranian people are already risking their lives. They're out on the streets. They can do this themselves. But I think, you know, we need to empower them, and that doesn't really necessarily mean us getting involved militarily. Now, the president may choose to do that. For instance, he could cut off the head of the IRGC, take out various, you know, oil exporting facilities, et cetera. And I'm sure that those are the options that Secretary of State Rubio and others are putting on the table for him.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the Venezuela action galvanized some people and saw that the U.S. is not afraid of unconventional interference. Cuba responded to the president's warning to make a deal with Washington or receive no money or oil from Venezuela. The country's president wrote this on X: "No one dictates what we do in Cuba. Cuba does not aggress. It is aggressed upon by the United States for 66 years, and it does not threaten. It prepares, ready to defend the homeland to the last drop of blood.
Straight to a Fox News alert. President Trump is expected to be briefed on the potential next steps for Iran as the regime uses deadly force to crack down on protests being held across the country.
So this comes as the State Department issues a travel advisory for U.S. citizens in Iran, warning them to, quote, leave Iran now.
And Madeline Rivera is live at the White House with the very latest. Hey, Maddie.
Hi, good morning. Well, we've seen the president turn to military strikes to crack down on America's adversaries. But senior officials are reportedly expected to brief the president on other options, including cyber attacks and sanctions. For now, the president is using one of his favorite foreign policy tools, and those are tariffs, to ramp up pressure on Iran. The president writing on Truth Social, effective immediately, any country doing business with the Islamic Republic of Iran will pay a tariff of 25% on any and all business being done with the United States of America. This order is final and conclusive. Still, the White House says the president's preferred course of action is diplomacy.
What the Iranian regime is saying publicly is quite different from the messages they are sending to the United States and the Trump administration privately. President Trump, as for him, he has always expressed that diplomacy is the first option, always has been, always will be. However, he is unafraid to use the lethal force and might of the United States military if and when he deems that necessary. And nobody knows that better than the Iranian regime.
Iran has threatened to retaliate against the U.S., but they're appearing to temper their tone, with the country's foreign minister saying, "We are not looking for war, but we are prepared for war, even more prepared than the previous war. We are also ready for negotiations, but negotiations that are fair, with equal rights and mutual respect." Meantime, the White House says an Iranian official has spoken to Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, indicating a direct line of communication is open. Over in Iran, human rights groups say a 26-year-old man, Afran Soltani, is at risk of execution for participating in the protests. His arrest has yet to be independently verified. And of course, as you guys know, that has been difficult given the communication blackout that the government has imposed on the country.
Republicans appear divided after the Justice Department launched an investigation into Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. While some members of the GOP have done the usual, remained silent, others have actually spoken out following Powell's announcement about the investigation into him and the renovation of the Federal Reserve's Washington headquarters. That includes Republican Senators Tom Tillis of North Carolina and John Kennedy of Louisiana, both members of the Senate Banking Committee. Those two will also play a role in the confirmation of the next Fed chair once Powell's term ends in May. Listen.
Do you think the White House is trying to stop the independence of the Fed?
Somebody at DOJ. I mean, the president said he wasn't in the mix. Another example of amateur hour, as far as I'm concerned.
Should they drop the investigation?
I'm not going to get into that. What I'm going to do is drop any consideration for any board confirmation until it's done.
I know Chairman Powell very well. I will be stunned. I will be shocked if he has done anything wrong. I understand that some folks have gone on television and have accused the chairman of perjury. This is America. You can say what you think. But a perjury allegation, particularly to the United States Congress, is a serious allegation. It's serious as 4 heart attacks and a stroke. And if you make an allegation like that, by God, you better be prepared to back it up.
Now, Republican Congressman French Hill of Arkansas, who's also the chair of the House Financial Services Committee, which has jurisdiction over the Fed, also vouched for Powell and called the investigation, quote, an unnecessary distraction. It's the first time in history a Fed chair has faced a criminal inquiry.
Kristen Holmes is out front. She's live outside the White House. And Kristen, you know, just extraordinary amid so many extraordinary events that are happening, both large and seemingly small. What are you hearing about Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, and how unhappy he is about what Trump's doing here?
Yeah, and just to touch on your point, I will get to Scott Bessent in 1 second, but to touch on your point on the extraordinary here, while it is a stunning development, it's not all that surprising. This seems to have been in the works for quite some time. If you look back in July, we saw Russ Vought, the head of Office of Management and Budget, essentially writing an open letter to Powell accusing him of lying to Congress. We also saw President Trump instilling a number of his loyalists on the National Planning Committee. That has since helped when it comes to the ballroom, but initially that was in part to look into this matter to look into what was going on with the Federal Reserve building and to ask a lot of pointed and public questions, which seem to be leaning towards some kind of criminal investigation. Now, Carolyn Levitt has said that President Trump at no time directed the Department of Justice to open this investigation, but President Trump has made his feelings on Powell incredibly clear. Now, when it comes to Scott Bessent, this itself is not that surprising. Scott Bessent is part of the reason that President Trump had been backing down from that language about actually firing Powell. Yes, he was continuing to over and over again berate Powell and insult him, but he had kind of stepped back from that firing talk, and that's because Bessent had been in his ear, essentially telling him it is bad not only for U.S. markets, for the global economy, if you do fire Powell. Even the threats of firing Powell are impacting the markets, and Bessent, I'm told, views the markets as his primary job. Now, of course, if you look at the markets today, it doesn't seem as though they were that affected by this investigation, but I am told that Bessent was talking to people close to him, saying that he was frustrated by this and by the idea of it potentially having a larger global impact. Now, I will also tell you that I talked to a number of aides close to President Trump as well as allies who say they swear that this is not political. They believe that there should be some more investigation into this building, into the renovation, and into the budget. But of course, again, President Trump has made it clear how he feels about Jerome Powell in this position.
There are more Republicans voicing their opposition to a criminal probe against Fed Chair Jerome Powell, including the president's own Treasury Secretary. A source tells CNN Secretary Scott Bessent has told people he is unhappy with the criminal investigation opened by the Department of Justice into Powell, and that there are other Republicans who agree.
I don't think Jay Powell's a criminal. I don't like the idea of an investigation, a criminal investigation.
I support the independence of the feds, and I hope that this investigation wraps up very, very quickly.
I will be shocked if he has done anything wrong.
I do want to talk really quickly, Jonathan Lemire, though. Here we are, what is it, January the 11th?
13th.
January 13th, lucky number 13. Here we are already in a short year, and you've written a piece for The Atlantic that talks about what Donald Trump has done over the past week or so in the new year. Invade Venezuela.
Okay, check.
Say he was going to take their oil. Threaten Greenland, saying that they're going to get Greenland one way or another. Overrun Minneapolis and kill a young mother. Investigate the Fed chair, and something that has drawn bipartisan rebukes. By the way, every one of these things are extraordinarily unpopular, save maybe going in and snatching the dictator from Venezuela. But every one of these things are losers in the poll. Launch that grotesque and misleading website that had one lie after another lie about the thugs on January 6th that beat the hell out of law enforcement officers, the same kind of law enforcement officers suddenly they're interested in protecting after, of course, pardoning these convicts who had been found guilty of beating the hell out of cops by a jury of their peers, told the Times he should have seized voting machines in 2020. Now, I want Democratic officials. I want Democratic lawyers. I want Democratic fundraisers. I want everybody in the Democratic Party to take to heart the old saying, I think Maya Angelou said it, that when somebody tells you who they are, believe them. Please. Donald Trump saying 10 months before the 2026 election, which he knows is going to go against him, which he knows may lead to another impeachment, as he has said himself. Now, if the Democrats are smart, they wouldn't do that. But he knows that. But he has said in the New York Times interview, I should have seized the voting machines. Democrats, don't act shocked. Don't act shocked. Get ready.
Yeah.
And be prepared so it can't happen. And then, of course, saying that civil rights advancements for black people who had the shit beaten out of them for drinking out of white water fountains, for trying to not ride in the back of buses, who had German shepherds like sicked on them for walking down the street in Birmingham, had water hoses blasting them against the wall, were unable to go to schools that our parents and grandparents were able to go to. Donald Trump looked at all of that and told the New York Times, yeah, that was bad for white people. It's been quite a week.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure to highlight those two moments from the Times interview about the voting machines and about the civil rights legislation. And I'm glad you just did here as well, Joe, because there was such a flurry of news in recent days. They sort of got lost. But that is where President Trump, that's what he believes, and that's what he's potentially planning again. And you're right. I took a look at this breathtaking start to this year. And Trump, look, he ended 2025, certainly diminished. He felt like a smaller character than he did at the start of the year. And let's be clear, his poll numbers are still very poor. That he is not a popular president right now. Republicans are still deeply worried about the midterms in November. But what we have seen, starting with that Venezuela raid, is pure Trump-id. Not feeling constrained on the foreign policy stage, using military or threatening military intervention. Let's add Iran and Cuba as other places where the U.S. is considering it, or Greenland as well. And here domestically, just doubling down on all of his policies, as unpopular as they may be, trying to sort of seize control of the narrative again. Flood the zone, as he has done so often in the past, not talk about things like rising prices or Jeffrey Epstein. The list goes on. This is Willie, this is where President Trump, his White House... Yeah, go ahead,
Jonathan. Hey, John, I'm sorry, and I love Willie's take on this also. They're breaking the law, by the way, every day.
Oh, yeah.
Pam Bondi is breaking the law every day. The DOJ is breaking the law every day. The White House is breaking the law every day. You had the Congress, the United States Congress, pass a law that required them to release all the Epstein files by the end of the year. All of them. What do we have? Maybe 1% out right now? And they were supposed to explain the redactions. None of that has happened. None of that has happened. They are breaking the law. The Justice Department, Pam Bondi, the White House, they're breaking the law every day. And so they're doing all of these other things. We're not talking about the fact that they're breaking the law every day by not doing what they are required under the law in releasing the Epstein files. Instead, we get this mad flurry of things that are happening that, interestingly enough, pull the media and people on Capitol Hill away from talking about how they're violating the law every day, because they're still not releasing the Epstein files.
Welcome back. President Trump urging Elon Musk to use Starlink to restore internet to the millions of Iranians after the Supreme Leader cut off internet access due to the ongoing anti-regime protests. They don't want the world to see what's going on. At least 646 people reportedly killed within the last 3 weeks as thousands of Iranians protest Iran's regime, weak economy, soaring inflation. The president announcing an immediate 25% tariff on any country that does business with Iran. I spoke with the exiled Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, who is trying to become the transitional leader there. He joined me on Sunday and discussed what a transition inside the country would look like. Watch.
This is a moment that is defining. Despite being completely cut off from the world, internet shutdown, and for a regime that is massacring its own people, this is an opportunity to liberate that nation. We hope only that the Iranian people this time will be victorious, and they will be, because I know that Iranians are prepared to die for this cause, and so am I.
Turning now to the unrest in Iran. President Trump has canceled meetings with Iranian officials as he tells protesters, quote, help is on the way. Natalie Brand reports for WJZ from Washington with what happens next.
Human rights groups say the death toll in Iran has exploded as anti-government demonstrations stretch into a third week.
The killing of peaceful demonstrators must stop. The labeling of protesters as terrorists to justify violence against them is unacceptable.
President Trump's national security team is discussing a range of U.S. options in Iran, from military to covert tools such as cyber operations.
One thing President Trump is very good at is always
U.S. President Donald Trump has told Iranian protesters help is on its way, just hours before he meets senior officials to discuss how Washington will deal with the situation. In a social media post, he said Iranian patriots keep protesting and to take over Iranian institutions. In the post, he says, save the names of the killers and abusers. They will pay a big price. I have cancelled all meetings with Iranian officials until the senseless killing of protesters stops. Help is on its way. He signs off with MIGA, which means Make Iran Great Again.
Positive vibes. Download
it. The system are really trafficking me. Brother man, we've been a try, we've been a fight every day, we've never surrendered. Them here in Christ,
Thank
them don't
you.
care if we die. You see them agenda, God protect me lives. See man, them no faith in Christ, and devil to guide them. They know the only we reside. Only by why no beside, but the world is their problem. We've been a try, we've been a fight every day, never surrender. Them here in Christ, and them don't care if we die. You see them agenda. Lord protect me lives. See man, them no faith in Christ, and devil to guide them. They know the only we reside. Only by why no beside, but the world is their problem.
Thank you.
Father, God, only you can save me.
Oh, it's gonna blow. You are amazing. People love your song.
The system are really trafficking me.
This is not the first time this happened to me. Last time I played it, they was like, who is this? Like, you're awesome. You're gonna make it. You're a star. You are a star, okay? You're a star, okay?
Them here in Christ, and them don't care if we die. You see them agenda, Lord protect me lives. See man, them no friends in Christ, and devil to guide them. They know the only we reside. Only by why no beside, but the world is their problem. Father, God, give your eyes for me life and me kids. Only you can hear me Christ and you never deceive. We not perfect as human beings, we can be weakness. We always try to keep it clean and avoid the sickness. I true say many of them no real, but it's not the business. Fight is not the way to see it, man, we have it in less. So many you leave them on my yard, but them never come back. The family hope here, postcard, but them never get that. This is some plan we used to own, we go and sell it to them. The places that we used to farm them and the first wicked. Uncle Sam and them cause he make him profit. And every time we try to turn up, take it head and we see. Grandma violence, one we street, but we still a resist. Only a man of God and preach, trying to still a persist. Hey, Father God, only you can save me. Hey, the system are really trafficking me. Hey, we've been a try, we've been a fight every day, we never surrender. Them here in Christ, but them don't care if we die. We see them agenda, Lord protect me lives. See man, them not faith in Christ, and devil to guide them. They know the only we reside. Only by why no beside, but the world is their problem. Been a fight, been a fight every day, never surrender. Them here in Christ, but them don't care if we die. See them agenda. Lord protect me lives. See man, them no faith in Christ, and devil to guide them. They know the only we reside. Only by why no beside, but the world is their problem.
He's awesome, guys. Go download his song. I think he's so cool. Okay?